Welcome to the O'Neill Perspective, Politics, Power, and Policy, where we break down the latest in politics, dive deep into forces shaping our society, and uncover the policies that will make it all happen. Your host, Curtis O'Neill, is here to educate, enlighten, and entertain as we explore the world of politics with clarity and insight. Whether you're a political junkie or just trying to be informed, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
A nation does not have to be invaded to be transformed. Sometimes all it takes is a story powerful enough, a grievance that is deep enough, and an ideology disciplined enough to convince people that surrendering freedom is the price of dignity. And once that happens, a country can begin to change from the inside out. And that is how the Trojan horse stays in the house. Welcome to the O'Neill Perspective, where we talk power, politics, and policy in a way that is meant to educate, enlighten, and entertain. I'm your host, Curtis O'Neill, and this is episode 5 in our series, The Trojan Horse is in the House. Now, in the last episode, we talked about the Iran that existed before 1979, the fall of the Shah, and the rise of Ayatollah Khomeini. So tonight, we move from revolution itself to the aftermath of what did that revolution produce. What is taking place in Iran today, and what can we learn from Beirut, Lebanon, when ideology moves through windowed societies and emotional pills capture the masses? That is where we're going tonight. So, let me put it plainly. The issue is not just that Iran had a revolution. The issue is what happened after the revolution, because a lot of people know how to protest. A lot of people know how to tear down. A lot of people know how to resist, but not everybody knows how to build a society that protects liberty, dissent, and human dignity once the old system is gone. And that, in fact, is the real issue. And this is why Iran matters today. Because what happened there shows us how a movement can rise on the energy of the people, but then harden into a system that tells those same people how they must live, what they must accept, and how far they are allowed to question power. Now, so this episode is really about a larger warning. You see, when ideology takes hold deeply enough, it does not just change politics. This is the reason why I'm focused on this particular series. It changes culture. It changes expectation. It changes fear. It changes the boundaries of what people think they are allowed to say. And once that happens, it becomes very hard to reverse. What is taking place in Iran today is the long shadow of what took place in 1979. Because revolutions do not end when the crowds go home. They live on in the institutions they create. They live on in the laws they produce. They live on in the culture they shape. They live on in the punishments that they normalize. And they live on in silences they enforce. And over time, what begins as revolutionary fervor becomes routine power. That is how ideology becomes normal. That is how what once sounded extreme becomes expected. That is how dissent gets narrowed. That is how fear becomes part of daily lives. And I see it on both sides of the aisle. That is how generations are raised inside a system they did not choose. And yet, people still resist. Now that matters because it remains and reminds us that the human desire for dignity does not disappear just because a system becomes entrenched. People can be born into control and still long for freedom. People can be raised under pressure and still push back. And that is the part of the lesson of modern Iran. The struggle between control and liberty did not end with the revolution. No, it did not. It changed form. Now, let's be careful and let's go to Beirut, Lebanon. Because one of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking ideology stays in one country. And it does not. It travels. Ideas travel. Movement travels. Narratives travel. Revolutionary models travel. And what happens in one country inspires factions, militias, activists, clerics, intellectuals, and political movements in another. Hey, can you see what's going on in America today? I think everybody wants to be an activist. Society becomes the battleground for competing powers, religious identity, foreign influence, and militant ideology. When new ideas and new ideologies creep into a country, they often do not introduce themselves as outsiders. They present themselves as protectors, defenders, guardians of dignity, champions of the oppressed. And in divided societies, that message can be incredibly powerful, especially when people are hurting, especially when people feel abandoned, especially when institutions are weak, and especially when the political class has lost. That is how emotional appeal becomes political force. And once emotional force gains organization and money, weapons, loyalty, and legitimacy, it becomes something much harder to challenge because it becomes power. So let's be honest about something. Ideological capture does not happen in a vacuum. It happens where people are already frustrated. It happens where corruption is already present. It happens where leadership has already failed. It happens where there is inequality, humiliation, instability, or moral confusion. That is why emotion appeals work so well, because they attach themselves to real wounds. And that is why the conversation matters beyond the Middle East. No society is immune from this. If people feel ignored long enough, they start looking for movements that speak in absolutes. If people feel disrespected long enough, they start gravitating towards voices that sound strong, certain, and unapologetic. If people feel economically squeezed long enough, they become more willing to listen to people who promise radical ideas. That is not just politics. That is human nature. And if leaders fail to address real pain, ideological entrepreneurs will always step in. And I mean always. Now, here is where I stand. I believe societies need reform. I believe injustice should be confronted. I believe corruption should be exposed. I believe ordinary people deserve dignity, voice, and opportunity. But I also believe that when people become so emotionally captured by a cause that they stop asking hard questions about what that cause will become, they put themselves in grave danger. Because not every movement wants accountability, as we know. Some want just control. Not every ideology wants justice. Some want submission. Not every voice speaking for the oppressed actually intends to free them. Some intend to use suffering as a ladder to their power. And that is why I keep saying I come from a moderate perspective. I do not reject reform. I reject blindness. I do not reject conviction. I reject fanaticism. I do not reject moral seriousness. I reject movements that act like they alone have the right to decide what everybody else must believe, say, or even tolerate. You see, freedom requires restraint. And whenever restraint disappears, guess what? Trouble is coming. And so the lesson from Iran and Beirut is not just that bad things can happen. The deeper lesson is this. People often do not recognize the danger of a movement until after it has become part of the structure of power. At first it sounds inspiring, like I said before. At first it feels energizing. At first it seems like resistance. At first it seems like justice finally speaking up for us. But once the movement becomes institutional, once it becomes embedded, once it develops a system for policing dissent, once it convinces enough people that opposition is immoral, then it becomes much harder to challenge. And by then, the horse is no longer at the gate. It is inside the house. And now the very people who once welcomed it are trying to figure out how they lost control of the room. So, what do we do with all of this? And so here is my practical takeaway. When you hear a movement, ideology, or political voice that appeals to your anger, ask. And I've said this before in the previous episodes. Ask yourself these questions. Is this helping me think or helping me feel? Is this offering solutions or just enemies? Is this building responsibility or dependency? Is this protecting freedom or narrowing it? Is this asking me to stay thoughtful or pressuring me to become emotionally loyal? You see, those are important questions because once your emotions become the primary doorway, ideology does not have to persuade you deeply. It only has to keep you activated. And there are a whole lot of people in politics, media, religion, and culture who know exactly how to do that. So here's my challenge to you. Guard your mind. Guard your values. Guard your ability to question the people you agree with. Because real freedom is not just about resisting the people you oppose. It is also about refusing to become intellectually captive to the people you support. And here's the question I want you to leave you with. Are we still capable of hearing emotional appeals without surrendering our judgment? That is a hard question, because it is one we better answer, because the future of any free society depends on whether its people can tell the difference between genuine reform and ideological capture. And so in the next conversation, we're going to keep digging into what happens when dangerous ideas stop sounding dangerous. Yeah. Because by then, the Trojan horse does not need to knock anymore, if you know what I mean. And so I want to thank you all for listening to the O'Neill Perspective. And if this episode challenged you, helped you sharpen your thinking, or gave you a fresh way to see what is happening in the world, make sure you subscribe, share the episode, and visit the podcast website at www.theoneilperspective.com. And as always, I want to encourage you to deepen the conversation by picking up my book, Breaking the Chains, which is available now on Amazon. Do not just hear the conversation, deepen the conversation. And go out and get your copy of Breaking the Chains on Amazon today. Like I said before, I am your host, Curtis O'Neill, and this has been the O'Neill Perspective, where we talk power, politics, and policy in a way that is meant to educate, enlighten, and entertain. I want you all to stay informed, stay grounded, stay discerning, and stay watchful. Thank you. Bye now.
That's all for today's episode of The O'Neill Perspective, Politics, Power, and Policy. I hope you learned something new, got inspired, and maybe had a little fun along the way. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and join us next time for more thought-provoking conversations. Until then, stay informed and stay empowered.